I would pay money to go in and teach that lesson to kids because I enjoy it so much. And the kids will constantly reference that moment as their favorite moment in my class later in the year and years to come. When you play chess, you have to think ahead, you have to plan, you have to strategize. And really has so many crossover skills to being a good student.
Welcome to Key Connections for Educators. I'm Nate Key.
And I'm Hannah Connect.
I got my start in corporate training.
And I started out as a classroom teacher.
But the conversations between us, they've made us better educators.
And now we're inviting you into those conversations because learning out loud together changes everything.
So whether you teach students or you train professionals, we believe these conversations can connect us all.
Today, we are joined by Cody Crook, a veteran English teacher in the public schools who has a real gift for bringing literature and content to life. He's known for using games and project-based learning in ways that stick with students long after class ends. This is his 19th year of teaching, and currently he teaches 7th grade English language arts in suburban Philadelphia. Thank you for joining us for this discussion today, Cody.
Oh, I'm really excited. Thank you for inviting me.
Hannah mentioned that you have a knack for using games and project-based learning. I'm really excited to dig into that today, talk a little bit about what makes those lessons engaging, why that matters, and why you use those in the classroom. And so let me kick things off just by asking you, what drew you to this type of learning in the English classroom? Was there a moment where you thought, this is it. This is what we're going to do?
I think selfishly for me, I've enjoyed games, board games, video games, sporting events my entire life. So it was that challenge of trying to bring in something authentic from myself. And being a teacher, it's imperative to, well, one, you can't share everything, obviously, but you need to share who you are with the students. And for me, incorporating games and friendly competition into the classroom is something that was just natural. Anybody in their job wants to enjoy what they're doing. And days when I get to incorporate games in the lessons are some of the ones when I'm driving to work I'm most excited to get to. And so I feel like having that feeling myself, being able to think about, well, what are the kids thinking? What are the kids feeling? I imagine, not all, but I imagine many of them feel similarly excited.
I know that from my experience with teaching too. The students, they're going to remember our lessons a lot more when they are engaged with it and when they're seeing more of like a fun activity or a game or something where they're submersed in the lesson a little bit more. So I wanted to ask, what do you see as the biggest barrier to engagement in today's English classroom?
I think attention spans and focus. That's part of the national discussion. More and more states are putting phone bans in the classroom, yet nearly every school has a one-to-one environment where you have a laptop, right? So you're getting rid of the one technology, but then there's that other technology. My school's kind of going through a transition between two different web monitoring softwares, and then you have are the teachers able to implement it? Are they comfortable with that item? And I think societally, right, because of our phones, which have really a ton of benefits, and I don't think I would want to go back to living life without the ease of so many of the tools we have on there. But I remember when I taught Lord of the Flies, one of the big concepts was instant versus delayed gratification. And kids from now forever will live in a world where they more or less have instant gratification. What is the answer to this question? I can get it within seconds. I want to beat a level. I can do that immediately. And so I think one of the barriers in an English classroom is when you're reading a novel, you can't get that immediate aha within 5 minutes of opening the book. And there are really great poems and slam poetry and things where you can get like a quick instant gratification and excitement, but a lot of the deeper learning, in my opinion, comes from novel-based units. And when a kid expects that they can get something right away, there is that challenge.
I'm going to speak just from my own personal experience. The other day I was playing Wordle and I got stuck. And
You cheated?
I
No, you didn't
had to
cheat. You didn't cheat.
I had to stop myself. I was this close, right?
Uh-huh.
To either looking up the answer or to phoning a friend or asking ChatGPT what,
Yeah.
if I eliminate these words, what are the possibilities, right? I'm not saying I've never done that. I didn't do it the other day. And I also didn't win the game, by the way. I didn't make it in all the moves, and it was a
Yeah.
pretty obvious word too, so I should have gotten it. But I do think that there is something to be said for that, that even in games, which are supposed to be a little more riveting and exciting,
Mhm.
there's this temptation that I just want to shortcut it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that when you ask specifically for English, and reading should be happening in most, if not all, classrooms, but obviously in an English classroom, it is that reading by itself. Don't get me wrong, I have plenty of students that love to read, but I also have an equal amount of students who don't love to read. And I have young kids myself. We read every single night before we go to bed. It's a cherished moment in my household. And then there's something that happens right between, so my oldest son is in third grade right now, and I currently teach seventh grade. So it's going to be something in these 4 years where I think most of my son's friends, like, reading is a cherished activity to the point where it isn't, right? And so if you're not enjoying reading, English classes kind of hard to get into. So yeah, I think that attention span and the way technology has a subversive effect on attention spans is a real challenge.
That said, I do think that having something like a game or a project does lend itself to more enthusiasm and more focus on whatever it is you're talking about. And
Absolutely.
so, could you share a favorite game that you've used that's really resonated with your students?
So the favorite lesson I've taught in my career, I've been fortunate enough to do maybe 9 times in my 19 years. And it was the first lesson in my unit before I even mentioned the word Crucible by Arthur Miller. I come in and I tell the kids, I throw them off their game and say, put everything away. We're playing a game. And I get these looks of befuddlement and intrigue and like, what? Because time is the most valuable asset in any classroom. So to dedicate an entire period to playing a game needs to have justified merit, right? Needs to be justified. And so the game I play, it's a game a lot of kids who go to summer camps are familiar with, called Mafia. It's a hidden identity game. And without getting into the nitty-gritty details of it, the concept is you receive a playing card, and that determines whether you're on the good team or the bad team. I call the bad team the Mafia and the good team the town, or the students of Crookville, or whatever dumb name I come up with. And you explain it and say, hey, look, you get a card. That card determines whether or not you're trying to get rid of everybody or you're trying to get rid of the bad people in the class. And so you
Mhm.
explain, you put the rules up on the board. If you get a certain color card, you're on one team or the other. And then I use a little bit of trickery. I'm not a magician, but I guess I use a bit of sleight of hand. And I'll put in my one pocket the cards I've been showing them. And out of my other pocket, I'll grab the deck that I've manipulated. And the key manipulation is I take out all of the bad characters. So there's no bad card. There's literally not a Mafia member in the group. I feel like 15 people is probably about the max you would want to do. If you have a big class of 25 or more, it's, you have the kids that don't want to play out on the outside. It's actually really fun to watch as a social experiment. And so as the game goes on, right, in the first round, you have the nighttime. You're like, okay, everybody close your eyes. And if you're a Mafia member, pop your head up. Of course, nobody's doing that. And you randomly pick one of the kids to eliminate, remove from the game. And then you have everybody wake up. Hey, it was a rough night. And Hannah is no longer with us. Unfortunately, the Mafia got Hannah. Right. And Hannah's like, what? Who got me? Who got me? Right. And and then they have to vote. This is where the key thing comes in. They have to vote on who they think offed Hannah, who got rid of Hannah. And you, of course, know that it was you, right? So you're the source of power in this environment, and you're manipulating your power, right? With Arthur Miller's The Crucible. For those of you not familiar with it, based upon the Salem witch trials of 1692 in Massachusetts that Arthur Miller wrote during the McCarthy era, right? There were no like witches in the sense of black hoods and cats and flying around on broomsticks. Yet if you were accused of being a witch, you were potentially killed or your life was ruined, both of which are bad. And so in this game, there's this instantaneous sense of paranoia. Who voted for me? And you're like, well, Bob would have voted for Hannah because Bob doesn't like Hannah, or John would have voted for Carl because they're friends and they like to mess with each other. And then when the people start saying, I'm not the mafia, it's not me, it's beautiful because they're all telling the truth. Right? None of them are lying. Yet they get voted off and they get frustrated. And you just like winnow it down and down and down until you get to the final round where you kick somebody off who's, again, not part of the mafia. And the townspeople are like, what? What's going on here? Right. And then you slowly realize, hey, show me your card, show me your card, show your card, where you reveal, hey, there was no mafia member, right? It was me. It was me all the time. I was instilling this sense of fear, the sense of paranoia in you in a safe space, because guess what? Our next unit's going to focus on this crucial American text that essentially did with real violence what we did in this classroom. And so at that point, the kids are just like hook, line, and sinkered into it. And they've had fun the entire, now, some of them have been frustrated, but like a healthy, acceptable level of frustration. And then it's nice if you ever have a day like right before a break or a weird half day or a day where you have an assembly, the kids are like, can we play it for real? And then you like actually do it with the real cards and everything. It's my favorite lesson. I would pay money to go in and teach that lesson to kids because I enjoy it so much. And the kids will constantly reference that moment as their favorite moment in my class later in the year and years to come.
You know what I love about that, Cody? Not only is it memorable, but you've whittled down the game to really highlight the feelings, the kids' feelings about this. And that's something that they can resonate with, that they can relate with, that they're passionate about. And going back to reading aloud to your children at night, when children are able to visualize those stories in their heads while we're reading aloud, or when they get to the point when they're reading the story and they're visualizing the events and the scenarios and the characters in their heads, they're able to match a feeling with that. And for those kids who don't have parents that read aloud to them at night, or they've never themselves bought into that love of reading and had that connection with the feelings that go along with the story, what you've done is you've brought that to them through the engagement of that game. And so their feelings all of a sudden are on. And that's a huge way that you're able to connect them with the message, with the merit of the story, even before they cracked open the book. And I just love that about the Mafia game.
And I don't know what the number is, but I'm sure the thousands of schools that exist, both private and public, that many of them at some point in the high school curriculum cover Arthur Miller's The Crucible. And so like on the one hand, that's limiting because it so perfectly fits that. But if you're a history teacher and you're going to study the McCarthy era, it works there. If you're going to study 1984 or Animal Farm from Orwell, really, if you have any unit in an ELA or a history class or maybe others, those are the two domains that most resonate, that deal with paranoia, that deal with fear, that deal with abuse of power, that deal with accusals and like false accusations. Really, like obviously the Crucible is the creme de la creme of what would work and connect, but it is not just that unit that you would have to do.
It's a parable when it came out. I think the people that were in the 50s,
Oh, sure.
they knew what was going on. Either they knew it intuitively or they knew it because the symbolism was transparent, the symbolism that was involved. But I think the further we get away from it, none of the three of us were around in the 50s to experience what it was like to be accused of being a communist and having your entire life uprooted and destroyed.
But think about kids today, if you're accused of being fill in the blank on social media, right? There's harsh terms that people call women, right? If you're accused of being that, like that's a big deal. Or if you're accused of, there's so many different things that are relatable to it that have real world implications. And so when you study this text and learn about the dangers of abusing power, the dangers of blindly accusing people, the dangers of living in that type of world, I feel like you've really got them the buy-in for it.
I love that it's so connected with the learning outcome that you eventually want your students to grasp at the end of reading the Crucible.
Mhm.
But I've seen a lot of other teachers, on the other hand, just play games for the sake of having fun. So,
Sure.
what makes a game more than just fun? And how do you ensure that it is tied to learning outcomes? Talk us through your process with that.
I generally didn't do this, but you could. You could very much turn that game into a writing experience. Write down what your experience was. What was your role, right? Were you, well, most of them are townspeople. There are a couple other roles. So there's like a nurse and a sheriff trying to save people and route out the bad. But then there's also the people that don't play, that the people that are around the sides. I tell them, I'm like, look, you can be in or you could be not in on the who it is. So some kids like put their heads down when the players put their heads down. So they're trying to figure it out too. But then there's some kids who are like, no, I want to know. And they're like, watch the whole time Mr. Crook manipulating the kids and they're like trying not to laugh. So like you can very much turn it into any writing exercise, which would connect to any number of standards in the English curriculum, reflection, etc. But you also, I feel like it's important that as the unit goes on, as the plot develops, you get into the subsequent acts, etc. You meet the characters and you start to grapple with the themes of the play, that you reference it back, right? If it was just one thing that happened on a random day in October, then you've lost that a bit. And so trying to continually call back to those moments is something that would be essential in making it relevant to the learning outcomes that you want. So I think that to me is the most important thing to do in that situation.
I want to back up a little bit, like go back in history before you had implemented this game.
Okay.
I imagine the story I'm telling myself is that Cody was not just suddenly one day like, I want to play Mafia. I got to figure out how to connect it to something.
I mean, that's not too far from the truth, but not the 100% truth, to be frank.
So
Like,
yeah, where was that moment for you as the educator, but also as the gamer
yeah.
that said, hey, this is going to work? And why did it work in your head before you even implemented it?
Honestly, I was playing a similar hidden identity game with my friends at the beach one night, Werewolf, and I was either about to teach the Crucible or I was like in it and it was like, oh, I got to remember it for next year. And I was like, holy crap, like this can work. It was one of these honest like epiphanies of why am I not doing this? And as teachers, we have a hard job because other than the summers, we're never off. Like every weekend, we're thinking about the next week. Like right now, I'm thinking about how am I going to get the kids to write these fall poems without just using AI to cheat. And you're never off. And so I think because of that, when I live my life, when I experience whatever it is in life, I'm thinking about, okay, could this work for something I'm doing now or a later unit? So I think it's for teachers out there, as you're doing life, right? Obviously there's a healthy work-life balance. I'm not obsessing over it or anything, but just must have that like third eye being like, "Hey, when can I pull this? When can I pull that?" I was having a conversation with a friend of mine and he used, I forget what the word was, but it was a word I'd never heard before. And I kind of like nodded along, but then the conversation kept going on. I'm like, hold on, can you tell me what that word was? Like, I don't know what, I just faked it, right? And so I tell that story now when we're doing a vocabulary lesson of I felt dumb, I felt foolish, I felt silly, not knowing what that was. And his students, I don't want you to feel that way. So it's like I was just like living my life having a conversation, but realized, so in regards to this Mafia and this game situation, it honestly was just an epiphany of I know this is going to work, and thinking about the alternative of here's a slide deck. Let me go through a slide deck to introduce, this was Joe McCarthy. This is what being a communist like, that versus the playing. It's two different spheres. And sometimes it's important to get the slide deck and the information in, but if you're not sprinkling it in with those high engagement activities, you're missing a lot of opportunity to connect with the students and have them connect with their learning.
Yeah. I remember I went to University of Central Florida, not as a student, but as a uh, business training
Mhm.
professional, and they had a lab there where they were talking about games and introducing games as learning. And it was when gamification was the big buzz, right? So they
Sure.
were all about it. But it was the same idea that they thought, like, how can we really embed this highly interactive idea? Now, this is a paramilitary think tank as well.
Okay.
And so, interestingly enough, this was Persian Gulf years. One of the things that they were trying to do was trying to get recognition for some of the most wanted terrorists in the Middle East.
Okay.
And they just wanted people to just have a facial recognition. And so they were thinking about ways to do it. They literally just printed the faces of some of these people
They play
on
Guess
playing
Who?
cards.
They play
Well, they
Guess
didn't.
Who
Oh,
with
they
the
didn't. That would
people?
have been fun. Guess who would have been better?
But playing cards?
They knew they were going to sit around playing cards.
Oh my gosh. And so there was the
They
name of
just
so
put
and
their
so
faces.
when they're playing poker or whatever.
So they're playing
Yeah.
poker, and the king
Right.
is this person, and the queen is this person. So they're just
That's
constantly
brilliant.
seeing
That's
these
brilliant.
people,
Right.
and it's little things like that. I was like, oh
Yeah.
my, like those little aha moments where you're like,
Yeah.
sometimes it really is a game that is putting you in
Sure.
this emotional space where you can
Right.
actually
And
grapple with those concepts. And sometimes it's just exposure.
yeah. I don't know if this bears directly into education, but it's at least relevant enough to bring up that I'm the co-advisor of the chess club for my school district. And guess what? Most of the kids that are the top 5 chess players at my school aren't struggling with their grades, right? Because when you play chess, you have to think ahead, you have to plan, you have to strategize, and really that's has so many crossover skills to being a good student. And when I think about like my friend group, both from high school and from college, not surprisingly, strategy board games are like my number one hobby, and I got 40 of them down there on my shelf. And a lot of my friends like to play these games as well. And typically, I'm not finding that many of these people that are playing these games are slow, or they're pretty sharp and they're pretty successful people. And I just really think that idea of being able to strategize in a fun, competitive way, like it just makes your brain work, right? It's not brain rot of just watching at YouTube after YouTube, scrolling through the social media doom, right? You spend 3 hours just going through TikTok versus you spend 3 hours playing a couple games with your friends. Like your brain is just firing. And so for me, like Mafia is one of those types of games. And just the fact that I was able to bring it into that classroom was awesome.
What you're describing is passive learning versus active learning. And when you're engaged, when you're in the strategy game, you're actively thinking, okay, what's my next move? Oh, what are they doing to me? What's the implications of that? All of those kinds of questions that you're exactly right. It's developing critical thinking skills.
Right. And when you're a student, like, okay, what's my next move? What's my next like strategy? If I'm going to study for this test, what strategy should I employ to be successful? Right. It's the crossover and connections. I'm sure somebody's written a book about, but I haven't.
Not yet, anyway.
Not yet.
If you have found this conversation valuable, hit the like button so more educators can see it. Drop a comment with your favorite engagement strategy, whether we shared it today or it's something completely different. And subscribe for more interviews like this to keep the conversations going.